You step out of the subway station, the heavy, corrugated steel doors sliding shut behind you with a hollow, echoing thud that vibrates through the soles of your boots. As you walk up the 32 concrete stairs into the pale, gray morning light, you immediately realize the world you knew is gone. The air here feels heavy, thick with the suffocating smell of diesel exhaust, decaying garbage, and something uniquely metallic, something that smells faintly and undeniably of rotting meat. You are standing on Kensington Avenue in Philadelphia, but as you look around, you realize this could easily be the forgotten corners of Baltimore, the shadowed alleys of San Francisco, or the rust-belt streets of a dying Ohio town. You stop walking, you hold your breath. All around you, scattered across the cracked pavement, slumped against graffitied brick walls, and draped over city trash cans, are people who are no longer fully human. They are standing, but they are folded entirely in half. Their arms dangle lifelessly near their ankles, their spines curved at impossible, gravity-defying angles, frozen in time like statues sculpted from pure exhaustion and despair. They do not speak a single word. They do not move a single muscle. You watch as a cold morning breeze sweeps a discarded newspaper across the street, brushing against their worn shoes, but they do not flinch. You walk slowly, your heart hammering against your ribs, past a man leaning against a rusted chain-link fence. His eyes are wide open but entirely vacant, staring through you into a dark, bottomless void you cannot see. You notice his left arm, the sleeve of his jacket is pushed up to the elbow, and the flesh is an ashen gray, peeling away in thick strips, revealing dark, wet, necrotic tissue underneath. It is rotting while he is still breathing. You feel a cold spike of adrenaline hit your chest, a primal, evolutionary warning system firing in your brain. You have seen this imagery before in late-night movies, in nightmares, in apocalyptic fiction, but this is not a Hollywood set. This is the United States of America, and you are walking squarely through the epicenter of a real-world zombie plague. You try to logically understand how this happened, how a global superpower allows its citizens to decay in the open air, while the rest of the country buys coffee and goes to work. You have heard of the opioid crisis for over 2 decades. You have seen the grim statistics about fentanyl scrolling across the bottom of the evening news. But your instincts tell you this is something entirely different. This is infinitely darker. You pull out your phone, desperate for an answer, and as you dig into the restricted intelligence reports and underground medical journals, you uncover a chemical name that makes your blood run cold. Xylazine. On the street, the dealers and the addicts call it tranq. You quickly learn that it is not an opioid at all. It is a heavy, synthetic central nervous system depressant designed strictly for veterinary medicine. It was synthesized to drop a 2,000-pound horse or a massive cattle beast to the ground for major surgery. It was never meant to cross the threshold into the human bloodstream. You realize you are looking at a terrifying masterclass in illicit corporate logistics, an entirely unregulated pharmaceutical empire operating right under the nose of the federal government. You trace the supply chain backwards in your mind, leaving the decaying streets of America and plunging headfirst into the global underworld. You find yourself looking at massive, brightly lit, unregulated chemical factories in Wuhan and Hebei, China. You watch in your mind's eye as millions of gallons of liquid xylazine are pumped into blue industrial barrels, perfectly legal, perfectly documented. It is labeled as veterinary supplies and loaded onto massive cargo ships. You track these floating steel behemoths as they cross the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, carrying thousands of tons of a chemical weapon hidden in plain sight. The barrels arrive at the bustling shipping ports of Manzanillo, Mexico, completely untouched by customs agents because, on paper, it is a completely legal, unregulated substance. There are no red flags in the system. There are no sirens blaring. You now understand the terrifying, ruthless, sociopathic genius of the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels. You see how they operate not just as violent street thugs armed with rifles, but as apex supply chain economists in tailored suits. Fentanyl changed their entire business model because it was incredibly cheap to produce and highly addictive, but it had a massive logistical flaw. Its high is dangerously short. Addicts wake up sick within 2 hours, desperate for more, which creates unpredictable chaos on the streets. Chaos brings the police. Police disrupt the flow of business. But you realize that some cartel chemist, somewhere in a hidden, heavily armed mountain laboratory, made a chilling, paradigm-shifting discovery. If you cut the potent fentanyl with a legal, dirt-cheap horse tranquilizer, you completely alter the chemical profile of the product. You artificially extend the high. You stretch the expensive drug with a cheap filler, maximizing profit margins to levels never seen before in human history. You create a synthetic heroin that keeps the user sedated, docile, and completely paralyzed for 6 to 8 hours at a time. You realize the people folded in half on the street are not just high, they are chemically lobotomized, trapped in a waking coma, deliberately designed to maximize cartel profits and minimize street-level friction. You are suddenly aware of how entirely, hopelessly outmatched the United States government truly is. You look at the massive budgets of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Food and Drug Administration, and Customs and Border Protection. For over 10 years, they poured billions of dollars into hunting down fentanyl precursors, scanning millions of shipping containers, and deploying elite tactical teams, completely blind to the fact that the cartels had already shifted their strategy 3 steps ahead. You realize the cartels bypassed the entire multi-billion-dollar American defense apparatus by using a drug that was not even scheduled as a controlled substance. It was completely invisible to the drug-sniffing dogs. It was invisible to the chemical spectrometers. By the time the government finally realized xylazine was inside the country, it was already heavily integrated into 90% of the drug supply in major American cities. You realize the system did not just fail due to bureaucratic incompetence, it was systematically and brilliantly outsmarted by a shadow economy that views human bodies as nothing more than disposable profit margins. The realization hits you like a physical blow to the stomach. The borders were not breached by violent force, they were quietly bypassed by a legal loophole. The pressure in your chest tightens as you look back at the people scattered across the street. The silence of their collective suffering is deafening. You watch a paramedic jump out of a wailing ambulance, rushing toward a young woman who has collapsed violently on the curb. Her lips are a terrifying bruised shade of blue. Her chest is perfectly still. Her breathing has stopped entirely. You feel a sudden rush of hope as the paramedic reaches into his bag and pulls out a small, bright nasal spray. Narcan. The miracle drug you have heard so much about, the chemical key that instantly knocks opioids off the brain's receptors and brings the dead back to life. You watch him administer the dose, holding your breath, expecting her to gasp for air, to violently come back to reality. 1 minute passes. The paramedic administers a second dose. 2 minutes pass. 3 minutes pass. Nothing happens. You feel a creeping, suffocating dread wash over you as the paramedic frantically checks her pulse and desperately begins chest compressions. You now understand the true, inescapable horror of xylazine. Narcan only reverses opioids. It cannot and will not reverse a veterinary tranquilizer. There is absolutely no chemical antidote for a human overdosing on tranq. You are watching highly trained first responders, armed with the best medical protocols in the wealthiest country in the world, completely powerless as people quietly suffocate on the pavement. The ultimate medical safety net has been entirely dissolved. You realize that if you were to make a single mistake, if you were to accidentally touch the wrong powder on a subway seat, or take a laced pill at a nightclub, there is absolutely no one coming to save you. The medical system has no answer. You walk deeper into the encampment, your boots crunching loudly over discarded needles, broken glass, and the detritus of shattered lives. You force yourself to look at the physical toll of the drug up close, and it is a biological nightmare that defies all logic and reason. Xylazine severely constricts the blood vessels in the human body. It chokes off the vital oxygen supply to the skin and the extremities. You see a young man, barely in his 20s, sitting on a milk crate, wrapping dirty, blood-soaked bandages around gaping, necrotic ulcers on his legs. The drug is literally rotting his tissue from the inside out. It does not matter where they inject the drug, whether in the arm, the neck, or the foot. The flesh-eating sores appear everywhere, systematically eating through muscle and fat until pure white bone is exposed to the open, infected air. You step back, your stomach violently churning, your hands shaking as you realize the terrifying, inescapable trap these people are living in. They are locked inside a dual psychological and physical prison with no exit. If they try to stop, the withdrawal from the fentanyl makes them feel like their bones are physically breaking, sending them into agonizing, uncontrollable physical spasms. But the withdrawal from the tranquilizer is arguably worse, inducing violent, terrifying anxiety, vivid psychological hallucinations, and rapid heart failure. They are utterly, hopelessly trapped. They are forced to continuously inject the very chemical that is melting their skin day after day, just to survive the next 24 hours without descending into absolute agony. You follow the trail of blaring ambulances away from the streets and step through the automatic sliding glass doors of an overwhelmed, chaotic emergency room. The fluorescent lights hum violently above you, casting a sickly, pale yellow pallor over the crowded waiting area. You walk past dozens of stretchers lining the hallways, overflowing from the designated trauma bays. Doctors and nurses look exhausted, their eyes hollow and shadowed, moving like haunted ghosts through a system that is collapsing under the sheer weight of this invisible war. The air smells of strong chemical antiseptics trying desperately and failing to mask the undeniable odor of human decay. You hear a sound that makes you freeze entirely. It is the sharp, mechanical, high-pitched whine of an orthopedic bone saw coming from a brightly lit operating room down the hall. You realize what is happening before you even see the blood. The necrotic tissue caused by xylazine cannot be healed with standard antibiotics or advanced skin grafts. The infections run far too deep, burrowing straight into the bone marrow, causing severe, untreatable osteomyelitis. The only medical solution left to save the patient's life, the only way to stop the rot from reaching the heart, is radical amputation. You look at the digital charts glowing brightly at the crowded nurses' station and realize the staggering, historical scope of the tragedy. American hospitals are performing thousands of amputations on young, otherwise completely healthy people, removing fingers, toes, hands, arms, and legs. They are treating everyday citizens like frontline soldiers returning from a brutal, unseen battlefield, victims of chemical warfare waged entirely in the shadows. You watch a lead surgeon walk out of the operating room, peeling off bloody gloves, staring blankly at the linoleum floor. He cannot fix the root cause, he can only systematically chop away the dying pieces of a lost generation. You step back out into the freezing night air, your breath pluming in the dark, trying desperately to catch your breath and calm your racing mind. You look away from the glowing red emergency room sign and gaze up at the towering glass skyscrapers of the financial district looming massively in the distance. They are glowing with warmth, power, and untouchable wealth. Millions of dollars are moving through those impenetrable buildings right now, advanced algorithms trading stocks at the speed of light, politicians in tailored suits debating border security on primetime cable news panels, ordinary people going to expensive dinners, laughing and complaining about inflation. They are entirely, blissfully unaware of the biological catastrophe unfolding just 3 subway stops away from their front doors. You see the perfect, cruel, devastating separation of 2 Americas. One living in a fragile, highly insulated illusion of safety, convinced the system works, convinced they are protected by laws and borders, and the other rotting on the cold concrete, sacrificed at the altar of black market capitalism. You realize this is not just a tragic drug epidemic driven by poor personal choices or broken homes, it is a highly calculated economic culling. The cartels have created a product so perfectly addictive, so efficiently destructive, that it eliminates the need for physical violence entirely. They do not need to fire a single bullet, launch a single missile, or stage a single coup to conquer a major city or control a massive population. They just need a streamlined global supply chain and a catastrophic failure of regulatory oversight. And as long as there is deep-rooted trauma, poverty, and systemic despair in the United States, there will always be a willing, desperate market ready to consume the poison. You walk further down the dark avenue, the flickering amber streetlights above you casting long, eerie, distorted shadows of the hunched figures onto the wet asphalt. You observe a woman sitting on a piece of damp cardboard, meticulously preparing a syringe with violently shaking hands. Her eyes hold no hope, no fear, only a terrifying mechanical necessity to feed the beast inside her veins. You realize she is a victim of a perfect, inescapable storm, caught precisely between foreign chemical manufacturers exploiting legal international gray areas, international crime syndicates optimizing their profit margins, and a domestic healthcare and legal system completely unequipped to handle the unprecedented biological fallout. She is the final consumer in a massive global chain of engineered misery, paying the ultimate price with her flesh and her mind. You now deeply understand that the zombie apocalypse of our modern era is not a sudden, violent, cinematic event that forces humanity to unite against a common, visible enemy. You sit down heavily on a cracked concrete bench, completely surrounded by the frozen, folded figures, and a profound, terrifying realization washes over you, chilling you straight to the bone. You always thought the end of the world would be loud. You thought it would be a blinding nuclear flash lighting up the sky, a sudden airborne viral outbreak that prompts instant martial law, or a dramatic overnight collapse of society broadcasted on every screen with urgent, blood-red breaking news chyrons. But as you look at the decaying physical infrastructure, the failing, overwhelmed medical system, and the hundreds of thousands of chemically paralyzed citizens lining the streets of the wealthiest, most heavily armed nation on Earth, you finally understand the dark, unvarnished truth. The apocalypse is not a sudden explosion. It is a slow, silent, methodical decay. It is engineered in sterile corporate laboratories halfway across the world, optimized by ruthless criminal cartels in the mountains, and ignored by paralyzed bureaucratic governments who measure success in press conferences rather than saved lives. You realize that you are not looking at monsters from a horror film. You are looking at human beings, the final, brutal endpoint of an economic machine that extracted every possible dollar from their pain and then simply left them to rot in the open air when they had absolutely nothing left to give. You stand up from the concrete bench, the cold wind biting your face, the metallic smell of decaying flesh lingering deep in your lungs, refusing to let you go. You look back one last time at the forgotten souls folded in half under the flickering streetlights. And as you walk away, stepping back into the fragile illusion of the normal world, you realize the most terrifying truth of all. The apocalypse is already here, it is highly profitable, and it is spreading. If this POV shifted your perspective, drop a like and share it with someone who needs to see it. Let me know in the comments what you want to experience next, and make sure to subscribe. See you in the next one.